Cheers and salutations. Welcome one and all to Americans Learn. My name is Kit. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe and hit that ring bell notification. That way, all of you beautiful people are made aware when we upload new content upon you guessed it, YouTube channel. And today, Primo Victoria, the D-Day landing, Sabaton history. Let's go ahead and get our learn on with Sabaton history. But by the way, folks, as always, we get our learn on first, and then we get the full music video being played afterwards. So stay tuned for the music video, and I will not be pausing. I'll be playing the music video in its full entirety. So in other words, grab yourself a tasty snack. I got myself a tasty beverage, and let's enjoy this video in a... Oh, again, please support the original content creators. It's the right thing to do, you hip cool cats. Now, without further ado, let's play this video in a 3, a 2, and an uno. Let's get ready to enjoy the video.
At least among the Western Allies, it is the most often told story of the Second World War.
And it's also the beginning of the Sabaton sound, Primo Victoria.
Through the gates of hell, as we make our way to heaven through the Nazi lines. Primo Victoria.
June 6, 1944, a few minutes after midnight, a couple of British gliders silently touched down in Normandy near the Caen Canal. Moments later, all hell breaks loose. Shouting, the British commandos race towards the bridge, overwhelming the confused defenders with hand grenades and submachine guns. In minutes, Benouville Bridge, codenamed Pegasus, has been taken. The first phase of Operation Neptune has begun. Neptune, as part of Operation Overlord, was designed to storm the German defenses on the French coast and establish a beachhead to strike further into Normandy. A massive amphibious landing was to be undertaken to open a new front in the war against Nazi Germany and its allies. At 5 different places, the Allied forces would land: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword. Thing is, the actual landing at the shore was only to take place after a lot of other chess pieces had been moved. It was vital to the success of the operation that paratroopers and commandos would go in first, soften up the German defenses in the rear, and disrupt their communications. Brigadier James Hill had told his men before, "Gentlemen, in spite of your excellent training and orders, do not be daunted if chaos reigns. It undoubtedly will." Far on the western side, the 1st American paratroops of the 82nd and 101st landed. They
Band of Brothers. Great series. Outstanding show. Still holds up till the test of time. I remember watching it with my grandpa when it first came out. This was before streaming services. We actually rented the series at Blockbuster. Oh, God. Oh, I'm aging myself, but okay. We rented all of the Blockbuster, like it just at our local Blockbuster store, we actually got all of the movies, like all like the whole set VHS, and we watched them in their full entirety. It was a fantastic show, a fantastic series. Still stands today. Shout out to the 82nd 101. Keep on fighting that good fight.
were to protect the gap between Utah and Omaha beaches, and, like the British further east, would destroy as many of the German coastal batteries and anti-aircraft guns as possible. The Germans were aware that an invasion was coming. The concentration of force around the British Isles was obvious, but they did not know the exact date nor the location. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, in charge of the German defenses at the Atlantic Wall, had made repeated visits to Normandy. Now, if the invasion was to begin here, the Allies would find not one, but several obvious landing zones. So Rommel worked the construction companies to improve the local defenses. He ordered the flooding of fields, the tightening of minefields, and the creation of anti-airborne poles. But whatever he did, it seemed like nothing could ever be enough. The length of the Atlantic Wall was just too large, and the Germans lacked both the resources and the manpower to create a solid wall of fortresses.
Yes, because they screwed up by invading the Soviet Union and Stalin and the Soviet forces. pushing eastwards or westwards towards Berlin.
Now on the night of June 6, the German soldiers awoke to flak fire and explosions. Local commanders hung on the telephones trying to get any sort of orders or information about what the hell was going on. Was this the invasion? Was it a raid? Was it just another bombing run? Fate had it that Rommel was far away in Germany just then, and at the same time, most of the Wehrmacht High Command was either in Paris or basically anywhere except where the fighting was actually happening. Many lower-ranking commanders lost their heads, sending their local reserves in the hopes of stopping the invasion as it began. And at first, German resistance was decidedly lackluster. Many sites were guarded by men from Eastern Europe, often Poles, Czechs, or from the Soviet Union, who were pressed into service with the Wehrmacht. They had neither the training nor the will to stand up to the aggressive attackers. This allowed the first waves of paratroopers, the Pathfinders, to place radio beacons and Hall of Fame lights to mark the landing zones for the real attack. Soon, over 13,000 Allied paratroopers dropped from their transport planes. In small groups they fought, ambushing the Germans and attacking their barracks and patrols throughout the night. It was absolute chaos. Firefights were reported seemingly everywhere, and German officers had a hard time getting any assessment of the situation. In other words, the paratroopers were doing their job. The second phase could begin.
And if you see some of the documentary series that have been covered, not on the History Channel, well, back when the History Channel used to be good, but like there are other great channels and content creators that have been going into detail about what the Airborne did, what a lot of these commandos did, and even spies and resistance fighters. The amount of work and detail and secrecy that was being done so the Allies could have a successful invasion. It is absolutely breathtaking, and there are so many unsung heroes that will forever, hopefully they don't forever remain silent, but I mean, there were a lot of key players that played their role into bringing down the Third Reich and the Nazi regime.
Today, in this burning inferno, where nothing remains but a force of sun bombs on the beach, aiming for heaven, no serving in hell. Victorious ours, our forces will.
At H hour, a huge swarm of American and British bombers made its way to Normandy. Since April, they had intensified their efforts to pound the German positions into non-existence. But Allied High Command was not taking any chances. Once more, they would try to level anything the Germans had put in front of the landing zones, preferably the anti-aircraft casemates and high-caliber naval guns. RAF Bomber Command dispatched Halifax and Lancaster heavy bombers. The U.S. Air Force sent out Flying Fortresses and Liberators at the forefront, Mosquito bombers, Thunderbolts,
Mosquito bombers.
Marauders, rocket-firing Typhoons. Pretty much anything that had a cool name was to be thrown against the German Atlantic Wall.
Yes. Good stuff all around. Great names. The Mustang, too.
All in all, over 11,500 Allied aircraft would attack and wreck the German positions on the French coast this morning. The Luftwaffe might as well have not existed at this point, because there was no way of even making a dent into that kind of force.
June 1944, Allies are turning the war. Normandy, state of anarchy.
Then the final third phase began, as the guns of the navies opened up. Whatever the bombers had missed now took direct fire from 900 warships of the Royal Navy and 200 warships from the U.S. Atlantic Fleet. Under cover of their shelling, the landing crafts made their way slowly through the strong waves. Over 4,000 boats had been brought along to carry troops, tanks, and war material into the designated landing zones. Even duplex-drive Sherman tanks and waterproof Churchill tanks were to be landed. At around 6 a.m., the first thousands of American, British, and Canadian troops were about to close in on the beaches. The coast in front of them was burning, and clad in smoke and morning mist, the Pathfinders had enjoyed the element of surprise. But this element was quickly fading. The Germans were now on full alert and began arming and organizing themselves. They set up defense perimeters at the beaches, manning the guns in the bunkers and resistance nets. Nearly all of their large artillery guns had been destroyed in the bombardment, as it turned out. Machine gun nests, the smaller bunkers, the control centers for the Goliaths, everything had gone up in flames. What the Germans were left with were little groups of men with small arms and mortars. Now, Hollywood and video games often portray the defenders as a large army of elite Nazi veterans, but in reality, this was the Wehrmacht of 1944. Much of the Normandy defenses were orchestrated by experienced NCOs, sure, but the men under their control were mostly teenagers or men over 40.
Wow. You know, yeah, a lot of those video games do show just how, I guess Hollywood, you say movies like Saving Private Ryan or either that Band of Brothers and a lot of Call of Duty video games kind of made it look like it's this giant elite force. But, you got to remember, this is 1944 German Wehrmacht. Not to be underestimated, of course. But, they've been at war for so long that they have depleted a lot of their manpower.
Many of them could not have served in the army before because of health issues, but the German army had been scraping the bottom of the barrel. However, even a frightened recruit can pull the trigger of an MG-42 machine gun, and the Germans still possessed quite a number of those. With the advantage of the defender, they prepared to rain down 1,400 rounds a minute over the beaches. Utah Beach was, like most other landing zones, a long strip of sand, but intercrossed by dunes that provided a modest amount of cover. As the landing crafts opened their ramps, the men burst out. Immediately, machine gun and small arms fire smashed into their ranks. Despite the heavy damage they'd taken, many of the German casemates were still standing, and the German soldiers fired from their gun slits into the oncoming landing craft. Luckily for the Americans, the Sherman tanks had arrived as well, providing cover as combat engineers raced across the dunes, trying to blast their way through the barbed wire. To the east at Omaha, the Americans were not quite as lucky. There was no trace of the supporting tanks. In fact, 30 of 32 had sunk into the sea. And while most of the German defenses at Utah had been obliterated, quite a number of their resistance nests here were still functional. Mortar shells tore into the landing craft, killing a third of the first company outright. Then at 6:31, the first assault ramps went down.
We've been here before. Is this kind of war? Crossfire grind to the sand. Orders were easy. It's kill or be killed. Blood on both sides will be spilled.
As the Americans struggled to get out, the German machine guns tore into the packed groups of men, killing dozens in mere seconds. Bodies piled up in the landing crafts, and many panicked, jumping into the water, only to be dragged down by their kit. Still, the soldiers pressed on, out of the boat.
R.I.P. to many of those brave soldiers. You look at the imagery and you wonder just how all of this could have been done, but their training, dedication, and service. And if you had a relative, one of your ancestors, fought in this significant point in history, please type in the comment section below. Share their story. Tell us who they are. We must never forget what happened on this day. A day that must never be forgotten.
And onto the beach. The first waves were completely exposed to the German machine guns as the men ran over the sands. For the only option was to make a mad dash towards the end of the beach, despite their instincts telling them to lay down behind the smallest amount of cover. The NCOs spurred their men on as mortar shells screeched past them. All around them, men were shot or blown apart, but more and more American soldiers were arriving. There were simply too many for the overheating MG-42s to take on. Eventually, small groups of men made it to the beach wall, firing back at the Germans, while the engineers blew holes into the barbed wire with Bangalore torpedoes. The British forces at Gold and the Canadians landing at Juneau fared better, as tanks and infantry arrived pretty much simultaneously. Facing only light opposition, They quickly pushed onward and beyond the beaches, under the cover of the Churchill tanks, which were armed with bunker-busting mortars,
Yeah!
throwers. They systematically cleared enemy strongpoints. Mines and machine guns were still deadly, but not in enough numbers to stop them.
Now, we actually covered this from a previous video from the Fat Electrician about one of these heroic generals who actually built up machinery and devices in which the heavy machinery, tanks, siege weapons could be brought forward onto the landing ground and not be stuck in the water or in the sand, but effectively not only clear the landmines, but be good enough cover for the infantry to hide behind. Unfortunately, some of the other beaches didn't have that technology at their disposal, but the day was still won by heroic actions by the Allied forces of the British, American, Canadian, and other joint military nations that were with us on this day, D-Day.
At Sword Beach, however, where the British infantry ran into a similar hail of fire from machine guns and mortars as at Omaha, 200 men had been killed or wounded in mere minutes, and the men were pinned down on the beach. Single 88mm guns blew the landing craft apart, and bleeding and burning men littered the beach. Several Churchill tanks were even knocked out. But even in all that chaos, the Allies made progress. They literally blew their way through and out of the German defenses.
Yes.
Explosive charges and tanks hammered the bunkers and...
I'll never forget this story. In case D-Day was going to be a failure, Eisenhower had his letter of resignation set and ready. You know, it's easy. You know, I think a lot of people think, when Eisenhower gave that order, it might have been easy for him. I bet it wasn't. It was probably the most heaviest moment he ever had to do. And I don't know what was probably going through his mind, but he was probably hoping that it would not be as costly as it was, but it was a costly endeavor. And we won the day.
Casemates, and once one German strongpoint was overcome, the others were open for attack. So, like a house of cards, the German defenses fell apart. The men overran the German resistance nests, often not stopping to take any prisoners. They cracked the bunkers with high explosives, then cleared them with grenades and flamethrowers. The surviving Germans were in full retreat. By around 9 a.m., D-Day was looking pretty good for the Allies. So far, the Atlantic Wall seemed to be fully penetrated. The German beach defenses had been overrun and the major strongpoints overcome. From all sections, the troops were pushing onward, trying to keep the Germans from forming new defensive lines. But, although the Wehrmacht had been pushed back, it was not beaten. In fact, new battle groups were formed, and the Panzer divisions and highly mobile Waffen-SS were making their way north. The gates to hell had been pushed open, and if the Allies wanted to free France from the Nazi stranglehold, they would have to make their way straight through the German lines.
Through the gates of hell, there's an another way to heaven, to the Nazi lines.
Okay, those are big words, Joachim. The beginning of the Sabaton sound.
Yes.
Well, what do you mean?
Well, in a way, it is not only that album, but that was the first song where we started incorporating, well, arranging the instruments that way, harmonizing the vocals the way we do, which is sort of like you would do in, I guess, Lutheran church hymns.
But whose idea was this? Was this your idea or a producer's idea or a little bit of both?
In this case, I am to blame.
Hey.
Actually, I remember we recorded the songs, this was, doing a demo back in 2003, I think, something like that. And I remember the look on everybody's face when I said this song would only have vocals as an intro, and they're like, what?
Oh, no.
Through the gates of hell, we only do have that. And they're like, yeah, and the only...
Okay. Makes sense, because when we first played the video, that's all we heard. All right, I like that. I like this. See, this is one thing I like about, not one thing. I like all the videos from Sabaton history, but you also know that or get the background to a lot of their great songs that they add to their albums, why they did what they did. That's why I love you, the audience, because without all of you, we would never have found Sabaton history.
You have delay and reverb? Like, no, nothing.
no.
It's like that. That's how the
Wow.
song starts.
Did you say like a Lutheran choir in 1527? And did you say it with this accent too, just like that? Just to really complete the picture. So,
No, I was thinking, I remember clearly when we were in the studio, we recorded the song, and we had done the lead vocals,
Yeah.
but we had no harmony vocals. And we had never done anything like this before. We'd always do we call it fotbollskör in Swedish, football choir.
oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
You get everybody in to sing along.
And everybody does it at
Yeah,
once,
the same harmony, more or less in rhythm, in key, whatever.
But if you get like 8 guys, it works.
Yeah, exactly. I remember Per was sitting behind the control desk because we were recording this at night. We were recording with Tommy Tekgren at the time in the Abyss studio. And Per was sitting behind the control desk. Me, Richard, and Oscar, the guitarists at the time, were standing behind the microphone. And I showed them, like, now we're going to sing "To the gates of hell as we make our way to heaven, to the Nazi lines, Primo Victoria." And just like that. And they're like, that's weird. And then "Through the gates of hell as we make our way to heaven, to the Nazi lines, Primo Victoria."
It's the 1/5.
Yeah. And then we did copy for the last one, we copied my lead. And everybody thought, this is weird, and heavy metal song, you're gonna destroy this, Nobody.
Primo Victoria. This is like you guys. This is like your song.
One of our most famous ones, actually. But I was so happy because I remember feeling it myself. I remember seeing Per, because once we sang them all, I told them just to remove all the other harmonies. So we only heard what we just sang. And then I told Per, okay, now just crank all harmonies up.
So yeah, they didn't know.
Yeah, they didn't know.
Cool.
And then when the choir first comes after the intro, Primo Victoria, I remember Per sort of like, I don't know if he did like that or he just pushed himself away from the mixing board doing like that.
Yeah.
And I remember myself for the first time, and this is quite an emotional moment for me actually, this is for me an extremely important moment in Sabaton history and in my life, because this is the first time I thought something was so good that we had done.
Okay.
That it was so good, it was, not only good to be what we did. It was not only good enough it's good for these guys from Fallen.
Oh, yeah.
This was really good. And it was actually as good and better than I would have hoped for.
To the gates of hell. Jump!
I love when the crowd does that. One more time.
To the gates of hell.
Hold on. One more.
To the gates of hell. Jump!
So, Primo Victoria, which should be Prima Victoria because it's female, we know now, sorry. But it was sort of means the beginning, or the first victory, or the beginning of the victory. And it's also, in a very real way, the beginning of Sabaton. Because I noticed how much I loved writing in that style. It felt like all of a sudden we had our own musical identity. We were not copying other bands. That thing that was new to us then, is now, a very, very, very big part of the Sabaton sound that we use today. That way of arranging the choirs, that way of arranging the instruments, having the guitars playing the same sometimes, swapping into octaves, doing different things, a lot of it.
See, I like this. I love this. You learn the history of the music. You learn about the band. You learned about the process of making the music to not only appease the masses, but to have them coming back and begging for more. We're going to rewind that just a little bit.
Now, what do you say? So, I mean, Primo Victoria, which should be Prima Victoria because it's female, we know now, sorry. But it was sort of means the beginning, or the first victory, or the beginning of the victory. And it's also, in a very real way, the beginning of Sabaton. Because I noticed how much I loved writing in that style. It felt like all of a sudden we had our own musical identity. We were not copying other bands. I mean, that thing that was new to us then is now, what do you say, a very, very, very big part of the Sabaton sound that we use today. That way of arranging the choirs, that way of arranging the instruments, having the guitars playing the same sometimes, swapping into octaves, doing different things, a lot of it, the use of synthesizers even.
And then now you guys are going to switch to a different kind of history on your next album, right?
Yes, pornographic history.
Hey, what? That kind of entertainment's been around since antiquity. Let's listen to that room one time.
And then now you guys are going to switch to a different kind of history on your next album, right?
Yes, pornographic history.
I mean, but you're not going to do any research on any porno sites because that would involve watching pornography. You
Yeah,
Hey, it's scientific research. Science.
that would be wrong. No.
That we don't.
We'll just make shit up as we go along.
See, that's great. See, that's what Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here's a new slogan for the Sabaton History Channel. Sabaton History, making shit up as we go along.
As you should.
See you next time.
All right, everyone, you know the drill. You click, 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 get some subscriptions, check out Indy's other channels, become a Patreon. That's it. Get the fuck out of here.
Drink water. Drink water. Do what you got to do. But now, folks, since you patiently waited, let's go ahead and bring up Sabaton history. Prima Victoria.
Through the gates of hell, as we make our way to heaven through the Nazi lines. Primo Victoria. Training for years, now we're ready to strike.
kick ass, man. That was awesome. I wasn't expecting the guys to get interrupted by a German Third Reich tank, but that was pretty awesome. See, we have fun. You get your learn on, you get some music videos, all this good stuff. If you don't got to get it, if you don't get it, go figure it out. Look, Sabaton history, we would not have found this channel were it not for all you beautiful, hip, cool cats. We're getting our learn on. We learned about these historic figures, these great battles, and plus we get to hear some of the music that's being played as well from Sabaton. After all, they're doing fantastic work, as they should. So listen, folks, please, 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 if you're not following Sabaton history, please do so. They do great stuff, outstanding stuff. Drink water, take good care of yourselves, and how about this? For our viewing audience, if you had a relative, an ancestor, partake in the invasion of D-Day, please type in the comment section below. Tell us their stories. Let them live again. We would love to hear who they are. Thank you. Much love. Take care, and all the best to you. Peace.